Hi, Mr. Freeland. Thank you so much for coming to be here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to tell about my book.
Oh, wonderful. Well, go ahead. We're going to do just that. Tell me about your book.
All right. If I had four words to describe my book, I would use that it's heartwarming, heart-wrenching, educational, and inspirational. And the story, it takes place in the 1950s, and that's the decade when I was born. And it tells the story of a black family traveling with their children during the Jim Crow era. The story is based on my family, but it's not unique. The experiences are not unique to my family. In fact, one of the readers told me, he said, I felt like I was sitting in the back seat of the car with you and your sisters. My sister Zenobia, she's my younger sister, and my sister Sandra. In the book, it tells of different experiences that are common to traveling in the Jim Crow era. But the crux of the story is when we wanted to go, my sisters and I, we wanted to stop at this restaurant. Now, even though my mother had food prepared and everything, but we wanted to stop at this restaurant. So the first restaurant we got to, we asked Daddy, could we stop? No, baby, no, we can't stop. Second restaurant, no, we can't stop. Third restaurant, well, we said, when we saw the restaurant, when we started approaching, my character, I told my younger sister Zenobia, I said, you ask Daddy, you're the baby, they won't tell you no. Well, they said no. And then my mother said, no, we can't go there. We are not allowed to go inside those places. We're not allowed. And so as the story progresses, a little later on, that statement really stuck in my mind. And I asked my mother, I said, you said we weren't allowed, even though we had our own money and everything. And I asked, is there something wrong with us? Is there something wrong with us? And can you imagine a 6-year-old asking that question, questioning her self-worth? And the response was, absolutely not, my father said, and don't you ever let me hear you say that again. And so from that point on, the story really goes from just a regular road trip going up north to see my siblings, my older siblings and relatives, to a history lesson. A history lesson. They had a hard time explaining to us because Jim Crow, traveling in Jim Crow is very complex. But they did their best to explain to us why we were experiencing the things that we did. So it's like a trip through history that ended in hope. But that's just a kind of general overview of the book.
Okay. Now, your book, Trip Chicken, is it like that one trip, or is a collection of multiple trips?
Well, actually, I like to tell people it's fictional, but it's factual. So all of the events in the book, the historical events, the stories of inequities, of course that's true. But it's just a story of this one trip, leaving home, rural Georgetown County, going up north.
I can tell you're very fond of them trips.
Yes, in fact, I loved traveling, during this time with my parents. In fact, that really was sort of one of the inspirations for me to write the book at this time, because I wrote it during the pandemic. I started it a couple of months after we were shut down from everything.
Right.
And I was lonesome. I was, wishing that my family, my siblings, were nearby. And so the wonderful memories. The first part of the book talks about preparation for the trip with the family, the community, and that was just so heartwarming. That's the heartwarming part of the book. And you can imagine the heart-wrenching part is finding out why. I guess we were pretty protected. And we just didn't understand. And we didn't let our parents off the hook either. We kept saying, but I don't understand. I don't understand. You know, we say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning in school, liberty and justice for all. We just don't understand. But, you know, by the end of the book, our parents, they did their best to explain to us, like I said, the complexities of living in the segregated South.
Now tell me, give me a little bit of your background. Tell me about Tryphena.
Tryphena.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Tell me about Tryphena.
Well, actually, this is my first book, my first published book, but I have written a lot of plays and for school and church. My background is in music. I'm a music teacher, and I taught in Richland One Public School for 27 years. And up until the pandemic started, I taught music at V.V. Reed School, V.V. Reed Academy, as it is known. This is my church school. So that's my background. I'm known mostly as a singer.
Okay.
Yes, and yes, and I'm the music director at my church, Reed Chapel. So that's my background. And I just want to say this, since I have this opportunity, to say that don't let age be a factor in doing what God has called you to do. Okay? Sometimes people think that they're too old to do something. Like I said, this is my first book, and it may be my only book, but God called me to do that. And He equipped me with what I needed to bring this book to fruition. He surrounded me with wonderful people that helped me. And so that's another thing too. Don't let a disability keep you from doing what God has called you to do. I had lost my sight, but I like to say I may have lost my sight, but I've never lost my vision. And so that's just a little bit, about me. I come from a big family. I'm the ninth of 10 children born to my parents, Felix and Juanita Rue. Grew up in the book I say I grew up in rural Georgetown County, which is another way of saying I grew up in the country. But yes, I've just been truly blessed to have wonderful parents that brought me up with God in my life. And I just, have to acknowledge the role that God played in my writing this book. It's all, the work is all divine. It's all God. And one thing that I did want to say is that I told you about the influence of my family, missing my family, but the main influence was the George Floyd murder.
Mm.
Yes. I could hear on TV parents saying, how are we going to explain this to our children? What are we going to tell our children? And I thought to myself, you tell them the truth. You tell them the history of black and white people. Tell them the history of racism in this country, and they'll understand. So that was a determining factor also in writing the book. In fact, my friends told me, they said, you ought to be glad that you couldn't see, how George Floyd died. So, and another thing that, another point that I want to make in terms of talking about the injustices is that if we don't watch it, we'll be back in the Jim Crow era again. And this time, it won't just be in the South. We can tell already with the changes in the voting laws and everything, and the open gun laws that's being passed, trying to be passed. may have already been passed. I think the open gun, I'm not sure. But it's more important that we stand up for we stand up and make our voices known. Make our voices known. We need to become a part of a justice organization. And there are many ways that you can support justice ministries. Everybody can't march. Maybe you would support it financially. So it is the time. It's the right time to let young people know it wasn't always like this. Your ancestors went through a whole lot to get you to where you are today. And you can't let it just slip away. You've got to do your part. You've got to be an excellent student. I would always, when I taught my children, I would tell them the first thing that I would, at V.V. Reed, when I could talk about God, I couldn't talk about God in the public schools, but I could talk about God at V.V. Reed. Okay. The first thing they would say, I would have them do an affirmation. God made me smart. God made me capable. God made me beautiful. I am a child of God. And so we have to teach our children to love themselves and to be proud of themselves. And I go back to the statement in the book when my character says, is something wrong with me? Why can't we do this? Is something wrong with me? And so we don't ever want to hear a child or an adult question their self-worth.
So your book is not only just for children.
Right. I call it a family book. It's not just for children. And the takeaway is different for each group. In my generation, people can share their experiences. They can share the things that they went through that maybe shaped their views on social justice. Well, let's go back to the real young children. They may not have gotten the history lessons about slavery and segregation. And hopefully when they read it, or their parents or grandparents read to them, they can be inspired. Wow, you mean to tell me slaves weren't allowed to read? No, they weren't allowed to read, but you can read now. Right. And you can be excellent. Okay? Yes. So it's for all ages. This is a good opportunity for parents, since they're teaching anyway at home, parents to read this book to their child.
I know you said you wrote the book during the pandemic, but do you see yourself doing any upcoming book signings?
Yes, I do. In fact, that's why I had my special T-shirt made. So that when things open up more, we can have a book signing. Yes.
What do they need to do to get their hands on Trip Chicken?
Okay. Well, you go to Amazon, and it's just look up my name, Tryphena Taylor, or Tryphena Taylor. I think it'll pop up, and you can order the book through Amazon. I also have a Facebook page. How about that?
Okay.
And you can follow me on Facebook. I have two special friends that they operate it for me. Like I said, I don't have sight, so I don't let that stop me though. Nice. So they operate it and put post on it and everything. So Facebook. I might even have Instagram, but I don't know about the Instagram part. But I do know I have a Facebook page and a business page. And I really would appreciate, your buying the book, because when I wrote the book, I wanted to be a blessing to others. And that's what I want when you purchase the book. I want to be want it to be a financial blessing to an organization. I'm not going to share which one it is right now, okay, or some individuals.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It has really been a pleasure.